So Miriam's Hope became a vision that was birthed in our hearts. My wife and I were foster parents for about 8 years. We've adopted 2 children out of foster care. I was a foster kid myself. And so what we saw was this system that really was intending to help children and in the long run. And as we began to study it and research it, we began to see some trajectories that weren't so good. What we typically see in the United States with foster care is kind of a 2-option solution to the problem. We see number 1, where we take children out of the home and we put them into foster care. The Kansas City Star did an investigative journalism article, 6-part series, and they investigated kids in foster care. And they didn't start in foster care programs, they didn't start in state offices, they started in the prison systems, because right now 80% of our prison population is former foster kids. 90% of death row inmates in California and Texas are former foster kids. So when we take these kids out of the home and we put them into another home, they're experiencing PTSD at 2 times the rate of war veterans. And so that's one solution that we've come to as a nation, and that's a short-term temporary solution, but long-term, those results are not looking good. The other choice is we leave children at home. In the family, we provide support services. And what that does, that's a burden on the taxpayer. Those support services are hit and miss and generally don't pan out long-term either. And so what Miriam's Hope is we're a third option to the problem that we're seeing. So we take families and we have housing on site and we restore the dignity of the family.
So we became foster parents at the age of 25, and we welcomed our first son in. He was 4.5 at the time and adopted at age 5. And everything was great. And it was probably with the second adoption that Miriam's Hope started to become something in our hearts. And at the time we were all about adoption, and we wanted to adopt this little girl. And so looking back on it, we weren't very helpful to the mother and serving in a supportive way for her, because it was about us.
So we began to ask God, just saying, Lord, what do you want us to do? How do you want us to engage this process? And a scripture came to us. 1 John chapter 3, it says, let us not love with words or in tongue, but in actions and in truth.
We started thinking about Miriam's Hope and how we could rally around parents and mothers that maybe don't have the support that they need. And the whole purpose is to keep the children with their families.
We become very close to the people that we work with. And so these people become our friends. And so getting to know them and to know their heart and to know where they're coming from. I mean, we've worked with people that have been 15-year meth addicts. We've worked with people that have tried to commit suicide 16 times, lots of mental health, lots of drug abuse. And so, when we get to know them and we get to see their heart, we begin to see where Jesus really dwells.
We are going to serve high-risk single mothers with their children. And we are going to have 2 dormitory-style living units, and they are 7-bedroom and 3-bathroom. And then we also have a centralized cafeteria that we will use for 2 meals a day for breakfast and lunch. And we're all about fellowship here and just trying to rally around our families and give them the best support that we can give them.
When we look at foster care and state intervention in foster care, that we as a church have kind of dropped the ball. And I like to talk about a story that I think helps us understand that we can change the legacy that we leave behind. Alfred Noble, he woke up one morning, opened the newspaper, and he saw his own obituary in the newspaper. And he was mortified, and he began to read this obituary, and he was actually the man who invented dynamite. And so they called him Dr. Death, the King of Death, and his whole legacy was about death and destruction, and he was appalled because he'd done a lot for chemistry and different things, and so he began that day to dedicate himself to changing the legacy he left behind. So he began to dedicate all of his finances, all of his fortune to establishing peace in the world. And you may never have heard of Alfred Nobel, but you've probably heard of the Nobel Peace Prize. So his legacy was changed by a cognizant decision he made to put forth his effort, his fortune, his talents, and his time into changing the legacy. And so what we're asking the world, or what we're asking the church to do, is to engage this same process, that we can change this legacy around how we work with children and parents that are involved in the foster care system. So we're asking people to go to our website, miriamshope.com, and become engaged in this process. Help us change the legacy that we leave behind. That 100 years from now, they won't remember us as a generation who didn't do anything, who dropped the ball, who watched the state take care of a problem that the church is actually responsible for. And so we're asking you to partner with us. We're asking you to come alongside this vision, come alongside this ministry, and help us make a lasting change in the world.